Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight one of Macon, Georgia's leading savants and all-around great skin diver and other qualities. Scuba. Other great qualities that often are on display here on our TV show. So, Buck, welcome once again here.
Hello.
I haven't gotten into your political ambitions, but there is another electoral cycle approaching. I don't know if you've been approached by anyone to go, this Georgia Senate position.
If I had, I would not say.
Okay. I
can leave it to confirm or deny.
I'll let that go for now. I'll let that go. Well, we've been discussing the criminal justice system, and we've discussed the trials in Wisconsin and in Georgia, Aubrey, and the Rittenhouse cases. And maybe we could talk a little bit about the juries and how the selection happens. So many times people say, well, the jury is biased, or the process by which they been seated is just going to be tilted in one direction or another. Can you discuss, as you can, the way that happens? How do they put the jury in there?
To start with, we need to understand the adversarial system, which is what we have here in the United States. And the idea is, and it works remarkably well, at least on a theoretical basis, that you can best get neutrality and therefore the truth if you have a slugfest between two sides, like two football teams on a football field, each one representing its own interests as strongly as the system will allow it. And that the judge and ultimately the jury are not players on the field. They are simply the referees who ideally ought to be neutral. So with that, if you are pushing too hard, if you are trying to go beyond the bounds of what is legal, the idea is that the other side will call you on it and stop you from doing it. And this extends to the jury selection process, the voir dire or voir dire. It depends on where you are in the country as to how that's pronounced. Either side can challenge a potential juror for cause. And cause can be any number of things. It can be, well, you are not from this district, you're not legally entitled to be a juror in this case, you're under some disability yourself, you can't be a juror. But by far the most common one is that there is some degree of bias that you have that would prevent you from being a completely impartial juror. Now that's the theory, and we can talk later about unconscious biases and that sort of thing. But there's another level. Each side usually has an unlimited number of challenges for cause, but there are also peremptory challenges. And a peremptory challenge for which each side only has a very few peremptories, you can dismiss a juror for any reason or for no reason at all. You do not have to give a reason. And down until the early 1990s, this could be for literally anything or nothing. But by the early 1990s, it was becoming clear that a lot of attorneys were using their peremptories in essentially a racially biased manner. They'd simply say, he's black, I'm striking him, she's black, I'm striking her. And under the strict meaning of peremptory, that was perfectly okay. But in, I believe, 1993, 1994, the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot use peremptories in a way to stack the jury racially in a way that's favorable to your client. That violates the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So.
Now, maybe the way to start, I can see that, but now is there one other issue here, is who gets in the jury pool? So my understanding is, at least there was a rather famous case locally in the federal court in Macon, is there used to be a way where if a federal case was going to be tried, there was the local judges, the federal bureaucracy here in Macon had a way to select people of outstanding character. So they would look in different counties and they would say, well, this person is, if a fine deacon in the church, he or she, mostly he, are going to render a very neutral verdict. And this is the kind of person we want on the jury. And so the people that presented themselves had been pre-screened for integrity, for piety. They were generally prosperous, educated people. And this was so presumably everything going on with the way the jury, the challenges and on. If you had that jury pool putting the people in the jury box, that would certainly be an issue. Then that was struck down. And the next thing that happened, I think, was if you were a registered voter, you could.
Who was actually voting, I believe.
Oh, really? Okay.
Who had a pattern of actually showing up and voting.
Right. So you had a registered voter that voted, and so presumably this would be a person that took his civic responsibilities.
Precisely. Yep.
And then apparently this was expanded, so that was still eliminated different groups of people. And now I understand, at least in Georgia, it's just having a driver's license. The smallest possible, I guess, entrance into the jury pool. So the jury pool is seemingly has been progressively
diluted.
Well, yes, or made closer to the Gaussian distribution of humans. So presumably earlier, earlier the human, and you could say that you're also I'll pick my words carefully as to who gets pre-selected or not, but it would appear that people with many problems possibly could wind up in the jury pool, and they might have been excluded in some way in the past.
Yes.
So the jury pool would reflect the general makeup of the population, not any. There wouldn't be any upscaling on.
Yes.
So that's going to have some kind of impact,
of course.
It not?
Well,
that's a big deal, and how did that happen, man?
Well, it's an interesting thing to see how the jury has evolved over the better part of a millennium in the Anglo-American system. That first of all, you've heard the phrase "jury of your peers."
Yes.
At one time, that was literal, the peers of the realm.
Yes.
That if you were an earl or a duke, then you had to be tried by nobles. The riffraff,
could not get in there.
Couldn't be done.
Yes.
And then you also have the idea of compurgation. That today, of course, one of the things is during voir dire, they'll ask, do you know this person? Do you know anybody who's related to this person? Do you live near the scene of the crime?
Yes.
Anything like that. Whereas in the very early juries, compurgation, the idea was, yes, of course, all of these jurors know the accused. That's the idea. And the compurgators are not really there to determine the facts of the situation. They are there essentially to attest to the good character of the accused, that the community is small, everybody knows everybody else's business, and if you cannot find 12 people, 12 men, to attest to your good character, then the odds are that you have done the crime. Yes. The theory goes way up. So now we have gone completely 180 from that. Instead of we want you to know the accused and we want you to know his business, we want you to be as representative of the community and yet as divorced from this person's reality as we can get.
Now, if you're a popular figure or a well-known person in the community, how is it possible? In other words, you're getting a pre-selection of let's say, of people that live in very strange circumstances. I mean, presumably they wouldn't know who Donald Trump was or President Biden. They would have no idea. If you ask, well, who's the president, you'd have to say, I have no idea.
You would be surprised how many people would be able to say, I don't know.
really.
I'm sorry to tell you that.
Well, so nevertheless, what's happening is you're getting a pre-selection. So what I'm finally getting into is what's the right jury pool? Do you want people that are really intelligent and that focus on their sense of propriety is extremely strong and they're not influenced readily by emotion? They're just going to Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. They're just going to pay attention to the facts and not be influenced by the courtroom hysterics or the great attorneys weep and whatever it is, call forth the angels but obscure the facts. And is it possible, as the jury pool is getting more isolated from the normal humans, that you're going to find up with?
I disagree with that characterization. I'd say that they're getting, the pool is more and more a cross-section of society. I don't see that as being isolated.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's true enough, but you would have in a Gaussian distribution of some people that knew who the president was. There'd be some people that knew that.
Yes.
And if you excluded every person that didn't, the Gaussian distribution would shift. So whatever that 5% is or 25% would just be excluded because they were aware of the crime.
Yes.
They'd seen it on television. I mean, these things are so widely publicized. How would a person not have seen it on television? And then, I mean, think about it. I mean, how is it possible to get a jury pool that knew nothing? I mean, you'd have to have a very strange jury pool. And is that what's going on here? We're getting strange jury pools?
Well, I don't really know about that. And also, you were asking what is the ideal jury, and I think you broke off halfway, really intelligent and well-informed or something else. The answer to that is, well, it depends entirely on the case. And it depends on what kind of case I'm trying as to the type of juror I'm going to get. Now, can you get the perfectly unbiased jury? I don't think there is such a thing. And if that is going to be your standard, then I think we'll have to abolish the criminal justice system and just let the crime spree begin. That human beings are fallible, the system is fallible. We can give a reasonably good shot at whatever you want to define as justice. Can we get perfect justice? No.
I understand that, and what I'm just pushing a little bit on is the jury pool in general, and a lot of things go on. So, for instance, older people don't. You can exclude yourself. I happen to know this, but if you're over 65 years old, at least the federal courts want to pull you in, and you don't want to do it, and you're over 65. All you have to say is, "I don't want to do this. I'm over 65 years old," and presumably the other point was in earlier years. I don't know how old you have to be to get a driver's license. Is it 16? I don't know how old you have to be on a jury. Is it 18? I don't know. But if you're excluding everyone over 65, they just didn't want to do that. What I'm finally getting into is it may be that the jury pool is to get into the voir dire is they've excluded many people, and the courts have done what they can over the years to broaden or restrict at the same time the people that are in the jury. And then finally, another thing that's out there is the ethnic composition of juries. So there was the deal in the Audrey case. It was astounding that there was a preponderant number of Caucasians. Almost the complete jury was Caucasian. But what happens if the trial takes place in an area, or the district attorney wishes to put it in a particular ethnic place, and where the population is one ethnicity or another? I think that happened in the O.J. trial when there could be different places to put the trial, but the district attorney made the decision to put it in a preponderantly Afro-American area, and with the idea that would lessen the the impact of a negative decision. I guess that was the way to say it. But that would be an issue. You can pick where you put the trial, can you? And there's some leeway in that. And also the trial can be moved to another. You could say, I can't get a fair trial here. It can be moved. So that's another card in the deck in the way the criminal justice system works. For instance, you kill some person, a prominent person in a particular area, and it's headlines, well, I want to go somewhere else.
Yes.
And if the judge does not allow that to happen, then it's subject to appeal. Any comments on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you are entitled to an impartial jury, and if the judge says, no, you're going to sit here, even if everybody in this county wants to execute you, then you've got a federal issue there, and I think it's subject to being overturned on appeal if the judge sticks it out. I think what you've got to deal with is there are always going to be political pressures, there are always going to be social pressures, but what if the judge wants to, if the prosecutor in the OJ trial wants to move it into a minority neighborhood where the statistical likelihood of getting a greater number of African Americans on the jury is higher, in order to make sure that there's less rioting or civil unrest when the verdict comes down. I'm sorry that it's between these two parties. It's between the state and the defendant, and within limits, I don't think you should be looking at the larger picture of what happens as a result of this case. Now, that within limits is a big qualification, the idea of sending a message. One of the accepted purposes of the criminal justice system is deterrence. And there's general deterrence. We're making an example of somebody. And obviously, if you're doing that, then you are thinking about what is the fallout of this case beyond these two parties. It's hard being made an example of in your trial and being told, well, this is for the greater good.
Yes.
But what do we do about this?
Although Jeremy Bentham action. Well,
Yeah.
asking this question, we talked about the public defenders.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is it if you're a poor person and you've been convicted of a crime to say, all right, I want to appeal this? I mean, is it harder to, or let's suppose
you can appeal it.
Well, I know it's expensive is what I'm saying. And the expense of doing it, how expensive is that going to be? And let's suppose you're, a middle-class person or person depending on your own money to pay for everything.
Yeah.
And then you've been put in jail and your legal bills are $100,000 and your wife and kids are there and they've got to live. And how expensive is an appeal? So one of the other things entering into this is the financial resources of the defendant. And many people lack the resources to proceed with this. And does the state step in and help with appeals?
Yeah.
What about for a person that's has some money, but and is worried about family finances to continue the fight? I mean, it appears that you could be at a substantial disadvantage.
No, the state there's the Office of Appellate Defender as well, and so if you are indigent, then
Well, suppose you're not indigent. Is what I'm saying. You just hesitate to spend another 100. I mean,
well, too bad to be you if you've got
too bad to you. Well, I mean,
so-
you have to say it's not your.
Yes.
You say, well, now my family, we have to mortgage our house or something like that. We have to mortgage the house. My kids are there, and it's the expense of an appeal might be an issue in this system where economics play a role.
Yeah. Well, once again, we could go full Marxist, or we could do two things. We could say, all right, this person has unlimited legal resources at the expense of the state, of the community.
Yes.
Or we can say the criminal justice system is irretrievably broken, so we'll just let all the criminals out.
Yes, and there are a lot of criminals out there, or they're not. And the crime is up in Macon. I think there have been 52 murders this year. Are there resources there to, particularly with all the distractions of being a policeman, defund the police, it's a very tough job to do that, the debt crime. So can the state put a criminal justice system in place to protect it. And the protection, just to make a comment, the protection, going back, you could say Marxist viewpoint, the system is there to protect property.
Yes.
And so if the country is swung to, that's fair to say, to the left, and they're not so far away from, Stalinist is a bad word, but Leninist viewpoint about property and being dismissive of protecting it, and we're just going to use our resources for crimes against people. We're not going to do something for minor crimes against property.
Well, in some places.
And that's in San, I mean, you see that in San Francisco and California.
In some places,
people break in.
Yeah.
And so where are the resources, what I'm finally getting into, what is the appropriate use of state resources in the criminal justice system?
Well,
crimes against people or crimes against property, or how do you do that?
Well, I want to back up a minute here. You have been over the years extremely critical of the federal court system and of the Supreme Court in particular for essentially, in your words, amending the Constitution by the vote of 5 people out of hundreds of millions. But really, if this concerns you, you're going to have to allow some more amendments, assuming the court is willing to do some more amending in that regard. Because ultimately the criminal justice system is funded by the voters and the taxpayers. And frankly, in my dealings as an attorney with the criminal justice system and the Department of Corrections, it is a very, very low voter priority to throw money into the prison system and into the public defender and appellate defender system. It's just not a winning strategy for any politician in his right mind. And I mean, for instance, I'll call a prison and there's no answering machine, there's no voicemail, there's no person who will pick up the phone. I mean, I will call dozens of times to be hung up on trying to speak to a client, and it's just ridiculous. So you should be talking to the voter and telling them to pour more money into the criminal defense system in Georgia. And if for some strange reason the taxpayer is reluctant to do that, then the next stop is to the Supreme Court and have them amend the Constitution and require the taxpayers to fund it better.
Well, Bucky, I'm pleased that you recollect my comments about the court. I would just let you in on a little secret truth here that occasionally I play the role of an agent provocateur in our conversations.
I never would have guessed that.
So. Occasionally I'll throw that out.
Yeah.
But having said that, that's an issue, isn't it? So the amount of money that goes into the criminal justice system, particularly if we have crime, we have this, we have that, is it, if you're a politician, do you want to spend money on new jails and commodious courtrooms? And how much money does it require to have a functional system? That would seem to be an issue there.
Well, and the idea of defunding the police, which is often misrepresented. I'm not sure I support the concept of defunding, even in its correct understanding. But the idea is that if we were to fix a lot of the malfunctioning aspects of our society, the broken down education system, the dearth of social support systems. The idea is if we could correct that stuff, then a lot of the problems that require police attention would not happen in the first place. So, but once again, money doesn't grow on trees. You got to get it from somewhere. And
there's a lot of economic redistribution is what the tax system does, particularly in this country. So there's a lot of money that's taken from whatever the upper 50%, whatever figure you want to do. There's another conversation about our tax system, which actually is extremely progressive. We have a very, very progressive tax system. So the money that goes into the court system comes from a relatively restricted group of taxpayers as far as this goes. And I think we're onto something here, the amount of money available to handle these cases and the reluctance often, and I'll get into this, with the prosecutor, the district attorney, making decisions about what to do. So I think, if you have some familiarity with this, isn't the predisposition, well, we don't want to spend a huge amount of money on this case, we'll just do a deal here. You know, you shot this little old lady, you know, normally we send you the electric chair, we'll let you off for 18 months, you sign here, and it saves us money and time. And
yeah, public defenders, a lot, I'd say the majority of their work is pleading these things out, so.
And so they sort of do a deal. Does the difficulty, just to make the case, my understanding is often the defendant cannot make bail, is in prison, and the deal sounds good to him. You could stay here another, whatever it is, decade waiting for trial, particularly with the coronavirus epidemic, which apparently has stopped the justice system because people can't get in the courtroom.
Yes. Well, I'd say a decade. I mean, do you have any hard evidence on that? Because people waiting decades to be tried.
No, that's a hyperbole.
I was just checking.
It's an hyperbole. But I could say 18 months a year. I could say that.
Well, speedy trial is is one of the elements in Fifth Amendment.
Yes.
This is why I push very strongly for a much more rigorous approach to the criminal justice provisions, criminal procedural provisions of the Constitution. One reason that these celebrated criminal trials do take so long to come to trial is because it's the defense that is slowing things down, and that is the defense's prerogative. But once again, if the state prosecutor is saying, well, we just can't get to you until 5 years from now, the feds are probably going to have an issue with that. So
they may go out on bail. Is that what could happen? I mean, somebody's been there, they can't make bail, they're sitting around, there's 5 years out. The coronavirus is in the prison, so we're just going to more or less turn you loose. Yeah. And we'll see you at some point home. We'll put a bracelet on your ankle, home confinement. And
I think I'd say, no, if you can't try me in 5 years, you let me go. Forget this house arrest stuff or bail stuff. Either put up or shut up. So I think it depends on exactly the circumstance, but that would be my response.
Well, speedy is such an ambivalent word. Is that, I mean, if you ever see you probably enjoy watching these drug shows on television. Trapped. I was a smuggler in Venezuela somewhere, and I'm waiting for my trial. I've been in this horrific prison, and I've been here 4 years without anything happening, and so it's maybe not an uncommon event.
Oh, yeah. It would be like anything else. It would depend on the meaning of that most important word in the American legal system. What is reasonable? So,
yes.
And that we cannot unwrap in 2 minutes.
Well,
if you're saying I've been denied a speedy trial, the judge is going to say, has the delay been reasonable given the circumstances?
It's red-haired child or stepbrother or whatever is fair.
Yes.
So is this fair? So reasonable and fair are two very, very tricky words that are abused repeatedly, are they not? I mean,
they are both very tricky. I would say that they're tricky in different ways. I would argue against the idea that reasonable and fair mean the same thing.
They may have some similarity. Maybe they're Siamese twins in a way. They're not exactly
I would
the same.
argue that reasonable has to be more quantifiable than fair. But we'd have that's a whole.
Well, all right. On that note, once again, a very stimulating interchange. And I think your great wits are going to do well in Washington if the circumstance. I know you're watching the next electoral cycle, and if you feel like this is the place to announce the candidacy, please let us know here.
Yes, but about me being a wit, I must say I'm not that great a wit, so you can consider me half lawyer, half wit.
All right. On that note, Mr. Half-Wit, it's been a pleasure once again having you with us. Yes, thank you. Thanks.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.